All right, what's up, party people? It's your host, Sunny Ray. This is the Sunny Ray Show. Actually, this might be, Scott, my first episode where I'm actually calling it the Sunny Ray Show. I've been thinking about calling it that for some time. But yeah, I think we're going to switch gears and just go with that now. And so you'll be probably my 150th overall guest, but maybe my first Sunny Ray Show guest. So welcome. How are you today, Scott?
Good, man. I'm flattered to be the inaugural guest in the rename. So thanks for having me, man.
And I am envious of your background. That is quite the backdrop there. So Scott, you and I recently met. But I don't know. I kind of feel like we're brothers from different mothers type of thing. I feel like we've been marching in a similar direction and quite inspired by, everything you got going on at BlockRewards and the story we're going to get into, obviously, the fact that you're a Bitcoiner, you're a Canadian, you've got a beard, you got the same hairdo as me. I mean, what more could we ask for, right? This is like a
We, I
great
mean, we
setup.
we actually like grew up fairly near to each other at exactly the same time. So
Right,
this
right.
this has
You
been a
said
long time coming.
Edmonton. You said Edmonton, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, there you go. So we were rivals back in high school.
yeah.
Only I was in the chess club and you were probably playing sports.
Actually, we were. I did play sports, and our schools were rivals. So
Cool. So let's dig into it. I mean, if you want to maybe give people, like I was saying, I love starting with the backstory and not the short version, take your time with it type of thing. And I'm excited because, we recently met, but it seems like there are a lot of parallels. So you want to take it over and yeah, give us some background here?
yeah, for sure. Thank you. I'm from Edmonton, like we mentioned. I started a career in financial services in 2008, about 6 months before the crash. Which was a really interesting way to kick that off. I was a history student at university, so I didn't come from a background of commerce or finance. Kind of fell backwards into like an entry level wholesaler role in the insurance world, and yeah, so 2008 happens. Obviously, Bitcoin is birthed like slightly after that, and I think these things kind of it's funny how they connect into your origin story. I wasn't early to Bitcoin, not at all, and they say the normal person has three touches before they sort of like really pay attention, and that definitely happened to me. So I start my career in finance. Markets crash. I'm all of a sudden find myself like just trying to understand what these basic products are, and I'm in like giant conference rooms filled with hedge fund managers explaining like how they were positioning, what they thought was going to happen. Flash forward, that career turned into sort of like 15 plus years, predominantly working in the world of benefits and pensions. So, over the course of the 2010s, I held a number of different roles. In 2016, I got into private consulting and started building a book of employer customers managing their benefits and group savings plans. I did like just tons of work in that space. So I moved to Kelowna in 2011, and that was my first touch with Bitcoin. When I moved here, I moved into an apartment building, and across the street was a coffee shop, and facing that coffee shop was like a coin and stamp store, and they were a locate. They were selling Bitcoin. They had like a Bitcoin. Um, Sign in the window, buy Bitcoin here. And I used to have my coffee at this coffee shop every day. And I can remember like laughing at people, like thinking like, why would anybody want to buy a Bitcoin? And so that was kind of like touch number one. Years of looking at this sign. And then 2017, I've now moved into private consulting and a colleague of mine who was like really far out on the risk curve with his investment ideas got caught up in like the 2017 cycle, kind of bought the top of the XRP. He was convinced, flushed a whole bunch of money at that point, and without me really looking deeply into it at all, that had just sort of like reconfirmed my uninformed opinion that the entire space was a scam. So, I'm just minding my business. And then in 2020, this is kind of where things sort of shifted both for me professionally and with Bitcoin. At that point now, I was managing a lot of pension business and some pensions, national brands. And so when the country shut down in 2020, that business is really about meeting with executives and meeting with their employees. So you're sort of like doing the strategy and the planning, and then education, member education, and not being, the world going to virtual really changed how that business, how we thought it was going to work, and we weren't actually honestly sure how we were going to justify the fees that we were charging. And so, as a firm, we pivoted to position ourselves as experts in the federal support programs, CERB, and all these other monetary intervention that was designed to keep the country running while it was closed. And that was for me, actually, I wasn't still interested in Bitcoin. I was just kind of amongst my cohort of colleagues early to the inflation party, like really looking at, we started watching Justin Trudeau every day and analyzing like the dollar totals that were going to be involved in some of these things that were being rolled out. And after a couple of weeks, I just started to wonder, like, man, like, what is this going to do to the value of the dollar? And then, my how it related to me, I'm like, well, what is this going to do to fixed income products and the fixed income portions of the pension portfolios? Like, how are we meant to think about what this is going to do for the value of money? So I kind of watched Netflix for the first 2 weeks of lockdown, like most people, and then decided, like I need to like start educating myself and started reading economics textbooks and sort of found myself into Austrian economics, Rothbard and Mises, and this was all sort of new for me. And then at some point, Amazon recommended me The Price of Tomorrow, which is Jeff Booth's book about deflation and technology. It's not actually expressly a Bitcoin book. So even when I found Bitcoin, I wasn't looking for it. I read Price of Tomorrow and was really blown away by the thesis and the argument. And actually, I read it again immediately after I had finished reading it the first time. So it was really sitting with me. At that point, I started, Jeff opened the door for me in terms of my curiosity about Bitcoin being a legitimate technology and a innovation. Um, and then I started like really consuming Bitcoin content. Second book I read was a Bitcoin Standard. And then I kind of started diving into the history of Bitcoin, the Genesis book, and the Block Size Wars, Jonathan Beer. And then I just went into the podcast rabbit hole, watching, like I'm now consuming Bitcoin content all of a sudden, like in a matter of weeks now, it's like all I was doing was, and I was just blown away by the depth of, I had gone from laughing at these people like walking into the coin and stamp store buying Bitcoin, magic internet money, to, all of this monetary theory and, the various like elegant pieces of how the protocol works, miners, node runners, and just, yeah, I was amazed. And so it was then when I realized like sort of like how full and legitimate and robust this idea and this technology was as a monetary innovation. I then started to really, really think about how wrong or how off base all of the sort of like fiat innovation in what we think of as wealth creation, investing, like all of these different strategies that we've designed to do are, it's related to what Jeff talks about in Price of Tomorrow. We're forced into a financial system that can't properly measure real productivity because that measurement is siphoning out financial energy at the top. And so I was always like successful in my work because I genuinely cared about the end user. Like I, came from this background of I didn't get financial education at university because I wasn't in that stream. And so as I was learning the business, I was really had a lot of empathy for the average person who can be very educated and then still be mostly in the dark about how money works. And learning a lot about Bitcoin really made me realize that actually almost everybody is really in the dark about how money works. And even the people who think they know the most about money and investing. really have no idea what this whole thing is. And so I then really started to pivot and became obsessed with the idea of building financial products that ordinary people could understand, that expose people to Bitcoin in a way that feels familiar and safe, and sort of applying everything that I had learned in helping people feel comfortable participating in financial products that let them actually plan for their future, and um, trying to do that with Bitcoin. And so my history and my understanding of all of these things were like products that were rolled out through the employer. And there's a certain, there's a lot of great benefits that come from companies trying to offer something beyond salary that forces people into, long-term thinking, saving plans. But saving plans themselves need a fundamental reworking. And I think there's lots of great concepts around pension time bombs, like just how we think about group savings plans also really does need to include Bitcoin, and it can't ignore Bitcoin. So flash forward, I ended up exiting that business. I couldn't stand it any longer. I started thinking about what now has become BlockRewards. And BlockRewards is a financial services company that is building products for employers where all of them run entirely on Bitcoin. And our vision is to create an ecosystem where companies of any size, up to the biggest companies in the world, have access to tools that are, can be deployed to an employee population with confidence that people are going to be able to understand them and participate. And, this is the thing about Bitcoin is like, I think that so far people who have found it have all experienced the same thing if they've done the work and really studied it, but takes a lot of work. And the average person doesn't have either the time to do that or doesn't really know where to start. And it can be, if you go on YouTube, you're just as likely to find bad information about scam coin or whatever. And I think the nature of like, there's an urgency today to do something with your money because of how fast it's starting to lose value. And so everybody's moving out on the risk curve. And that can be something that also pushes people away from Bitcoin because I think a lot of people who may be interested in cryptocurrency have this backward opinion that like Bitcoin is somehow not moving fast enough. It's not, you'll not get rich buying Bitcoin, which these are the kinds of things that we want to help the broader population understand better. So, yeah, kind of like to put a bow on it, I hope that what we're going to accomplish at Block Rewards is using the employer as a trusted partner to expose mass sections of the population to the power of Bitcoin's compound annual growth rate, but then, use that as a gateway to get people interested in why you want Bitcoin, why you want to treat Bitcoin as a savings tool, why it's a good idea to think about having some Bitcoin, whatever you're comfortable with, depending on your level of volatility tolerance or how much time you're willing to spend learning about it. Um, but employers have a great opportunity here. And what's in it for them is to be different and forward thinking and do something really important for their staff, which they're in many cases already trying to do with the products that they're offering now. So these things I think have all kind of like come to a head and created a real opportunity for us to do something very cool at a very big scale.
That is a really, really inspiring story. I'm just letting it all soak in. I have a question for you. So you said that, first of all, the fact that, you went down that rabbit hole for how long was it? Maybe 6 months at least, 9 months before, you can even like eat properly and sleep and think. Uh, but like you said, the average person, they don't either have the desire or the time or the energy or whatever it might be. But how do you get them there? I guess, is it through block rewards? Is it by just, orange pilling them through their pay? Um, but and then I guess you're kind of riding the wave or the thesis that employers now with the treasury movement and all these different exciting things that are happening around the world, that they will be kind of your, I guess, your Morpheus and bringing them into the into the world of Bitcoin. But I'm just curious, like, and I know you guys also have a focus on education, but like, how do you
Mhm.
accelerate that process for the average person?
Yeah, I mean, the good part about the thing about Bitcoin is that you don't have to wait years for it to work its magic, right? And so
Hmm.
um, I think that the average person today, particularly younger people in the workforce, do have different ideas about what an acceptable return on investment is, and because they're kind of came from meme coin land and like GameStop, and things have changed. And so the idea of like taking 5% of your paycheck and putting it into an index fund that hopefully will average you 7% over the next 35 years, and when you're 70, like that I think is changing too. And so there's an appetite for people to learn more. With Bitcoin, it's like, obviously it depends on, or we'll see how it behaves in the future. Oh, in the past, how the point at which you started could have a really great impact on how long of a time you needed to really see this thing working before you might be interested to learn more. So, like for me, I just about timed it perfectly. It was kind of March of 2020, which was like a bottom, a cycle bottom. So I started buying it, and it's like, oh, all of a sudden, okay, it's gone way up, and then it goes way down. But as it's going up, I think that the beauty of these of our products, because they're tied to the payroll cycle. So you're basically dollar cost averaging in, every 2 weeks, and you're seeing your stack change because you're probably going to be checking it, regularly. And so for people, our company's 2.5 years old, and we have customers that date back to day one. The Bitcoin price in that time, I don't know the numbers exactly, but it's on a 3 or 4x since that time. So if you had, saved 5 or 10,000 with us over that 2.5 years, you might now have like 40 or $50,000 in cash value. And so, from the perspective of the kinds of things a company could offer its staff, there isn't anything else like this, right? And nothing that would actually also meet the acceptable definitions of something a company would want to take the chance in rolling out to their employees. Because there's also that too, right? It has to balance. Um, Companies aren't going to be offering their staff like a frog coin savings plan. It's just not realistic. So I think that that's one thing. There's also been so much, we really truly are living right now in the time where Bitcoin is transforming and maturing into an institutional asset. Like, it's the idea for us, people ask us all the time, like, is this just a little bit too early still? I mean, I can say for sure, like 2018 would have been way too early because, then you would have had no idea when regional governments might be looking at this as something that they would want to own. There wasn't a company like Strategy that was buying Bitcoin in bulk and slaying the rest of the index as a result of this. So like there have been a lot of like really important changes that are getting hard to ignore. And you mentioned the Treasury one. Like I think this is going to be, it's newsworthy right now because a handful of companies have adopted it and it's totally novel. But at some point, Harvard Business School grads are going to have to be viewing like Saylor as a case study. And I believe fully that C-suiters across the Fortune 1000 will have to answer their shareholders as to why they would have been aware or not aware of what the Strategy share price was doing between 2020 and 2025 as they were stacking Bitcoin like madmen. And nobody seems to have spent the time to like validate whether or not their ideas had merit because obviously nobody copied it for years. And it's going to be an indictment on a lot of very smart people, I think. And I was at the strategy conference in Orlando in May, and Saylor was telling the story of his opportunity to pitch Bitcoin Treasury to Microsoft. And the Microsoft executive team gave him 3 minutes to make his pitch. And even that, I'm like, those people are going to be fired. Like at some point, Microsoft is sitting on, I don't know what the number is. Like it might be $1 trillion. Like they're sitting on piles of cash. And to take this guy who is like potentially one of the most important business minds, certainly of the century, and give the guy 3 minutes to like relay a very intellectually dense concept, and then pass is like, it's wild.
Yeah, what a time to be alive. And what about the other orange elephant in the room? The fact that the United States president is like our number one spokesperson. Like, did you ever see that one coming as you
Yeah,
were going down
totally.
the rabbit hole in
Yeah,
2020? Like,
yeah.
wild, no? Crazy times to be alive.
I think I was Saifedean Ammuz's second book was the Fiat Standard, and in the Fiat Standard, he actually talks about the idea that Bitcoin could force some sort of like unintentional debt jubilee, because as it keeps appreciating against. So if the U.S. and in the now we're talking about Trump and this idea of like whether or not the U.S. will announce a federal strategic reserve, and that like $1 trillion of Bitcoin today, if Bitcoin continues to appreciate, could actually pay off all of their fiat debt, like if it's growing at a rate faster. And I wonder, like I really do wonder where all this is going.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's an amazing time. Hey, I gotta ask you, so, building a business is obviously not easy, or else everyone would be doing it. Um, I have an affinity towards like entrepreneurial minds out there, and a lot of people that follow me are running businesses or are thinking about it. What are maybe some of the bigger challenges you faced? Like, I just wonder, in trying to do what you're doing, are there like regulatory things that have gotten in your way, or banking, or just, I don't know, mindset or family, or like what are the things that have stood in your way? I know maybe all the above.
Yeah, probably all the above. I got to give a shout out to Josh Curlett, who's my co-founder and co-CEO. Josh is a really experienced operator who has scaled businesses already successfully. And so a challenge and an opportunity for us simultaneously has been sort of erecting all of these different repeatable processes and structures. Like, so for the kind of thing that we're doing, where we built a software from scratch that operates like on a schedule and turns fiat into Bitcoin and needs to work perfectly. Like it has to, so a lot of things have to happen to get there. And so, yeah, one of the biggest challenges I would say, and it pulls all that in, regulatory, what things are required to be allowed to do this? How does it need to be documented? Like, what are the user agreements need to look like? We need to find the right legal people who can help you out with that. And one thing I will say as well is, the community of other sort of like Bitcoin founders and Bitcoin companies are just so amazing, right? And like including yourself, man. Like what I have found is a never-ending list of people who are willing to help, or if they think the idea is good, if they see that you have the right intentions, people who have come before you, just navigating some of these different pitfalls and hurdles. So, so that's been great. Funding businesses is a stress and a challenge, and I think with like with Bitcoin companies, there is a unique challenge where you're sort of limited to raising from investors that believe in the Bitcoin thesis or understand Bitcoin, which is already a very small percentage of the population. And then of those people, you need to find people who are willing to part with their Bitcoin or invest in your business instead of owning Bitcoin, which is a quite a challenge. And even for people who aren't hardcore Bitcoiners, as we're sort of talking to high net worth investors, like they need themselves to understand why BlockRewards would be a better opportunity than just hodling. And obviously we think it is, but yeah, so that's these are challenges, I think. And then lastly, like, neither of Josh or I are, we're not devs. We're not like founder and CTO. So learning the ropes of building software as like as someone who didn't come from that world is a has been an interesting journey because you've learned that it's really difficult to predict how long certain things are going to take to get done. And so estimating timelines and not understanding what's involved in hitting or missing milestones. So that's been a real learning curve.
Cool. Interesting. Interesting. Um, any advice you'd give yourself? Like when you were working in like pension land, like what is it, 2020 you said, pre-2020? Anything you would tell yourself that might accelerate your process here?
Yeah, I think obviously sell everything and buy Bitcoin. And yeah, no, I'm not sure if there's anything that we could have like avoided. It would have been great to get everything right, which obviously nobody is ever gonna do. And I think even had the timing of it was exactly what it was meant to be because um, it's taken us kind of this long to get where we are right now, and think the product is actually ready for where the market is right now. So, had I started 2 years earlier, I think I would have had a really hard time getting any traction. And this is kind of true. Like, when we first started up, what was still really fresh in the public perception was the FTX crash. And like to the average outsider, so Bitcoin had gone from 69,000 to 16, and that was really, I think, what all that the average person knew about Bitcoin. And this is like such a funny thing about it. And it could happen again. This weird idea of like this thing that was at one point a dollar crashed down to $16,000. And because of that, the average person thought it was like had a likelihood of vanishing entirely. But yeah, I mean, in 2022, 2023 feels like a lifetime ago, but it really was a very toxic time to be trying to talk to companies about paying their staff in Bitcoin. So yeah, I think these things kind of all
And what
end
about
up
now,
working out
Scott? Like
exactly like.
when you're going out there and talking to employers, I'm just curious, like is it like one out of every 100 that might even consider something like this? Or is it one out of 1,000? I mean,
Yeah,
like I get it. Like trust me, I'm super excited. Like I can't believe BlackRock's and the president and Michael Saylor. I mean, to me, it just seems like things are moving at a hyper accelerated speed. But in terms of like, what's the pulse out there in the world? Like because you're speaking with, decision makers, CEOs, C-level people at all these
yeah.
giant companies. Is there still a ton of pushback, or are people starting to kind of go, wait, maybe I'm on the wrong side of the trade here?
Yeah, I mean, and BlackRock is doing us a ton of favors. Like the conservative portfolio, I think now has a default 3% allocation to IBIT. So everybody's buying Bitcoin, whether they realize it or not. And the conservative portfolio has a 3% allocation to Bitcoin. Think about that for a second, right? Like,
I
and
didn't
I've
know
seen,
that. Is that the
I
case?
think it was Ray Dalio within the last couple of months
Hmm.
said that the ideal allocation to Bitcoin is 15% in a
Jeez.
portfolio. So it's like objects in the rearview mirror are moving faster than, these are the kinds of people like, some person executive at whatever company might not listen to me, but a lot of those people do consume content from people like Ray Dalio. So I think these are really significant. Um, yeah, we kind of have a spectrum as far as like what are companies, what are we seeing? I'll say that there is a very fast growing cohort of, business owners and entrepreneurs and executives that do understand Bitcoin. And when we can connect to those people, it's a very easy sale. Like it's people who understand why we're doing what we're doing and how this could benefit their company and their employees. It's just a totally different conversation. And it's really at that point just about like, okay, so how does it work? Can I see the software? What does it cost? Great. How do we start? So that's number one segment. And I do really believe that that is a number that is going to grow a lot over the next couple of years. And that is the part of the decision maker population that has me most excited. Like we really don't try to bang our head against the wall selling people who aren't there yet. And like, so we're not going to be trying to get Microsoft as a customer, as an example. Because if you can't understand why your company would want to own Bitcoin, you're probably unlikely to understand why your employees should be saving in it too. Um, there is definitely a group in the middle, and those are the people who haven't gotten Bitcoin yet, but do have the opinion that it is legitimate, like that they don't know enough about it. And I actually think we have a massive opportunity with these people too, because we are positioning ourselves as a trusted sort of kind of institutional style partner for companies to go on this journey together. And good leaders in corporations of all sizes, consider solutions that could be beneficial, whether they, like this is just part of what people do. So we have seen a growing number of people reaching out because they know that they don't know enough about it and they know that they're not ready to have a good opinion about it. But those are becoming really good opportunities for us too, because we have built something that is designed to be safe and be minimize the barriers of entry for both the company and for their employees. And so I think we're going to see, so from there, it's really our job to explain to people enough to get them in a position where they might be willing to start. And then from there, that takes us back to what we were talking about like 10 minutes ago, where the beauty of Bitcoin, should it continue to perform the way it has, is that you don't need to give this thing like a 6 year test drive to figure out whether or not it's working. Like, talk to us again in 6 months or a year or in 2 years, and you're probably going to be very happy. So, and this is the thing too about the way payroll style savings plans can work is it, there for a lot of people, it's like save whatever you're comfortable with. And what your comfort level at the start might be like $10 a paycheck, but that amount still is getting you enough to pay attention and start learning. And as you learn, and this is exactly what happened to me, you start upping your conviction and you start allocating more and you start understanding more and more that it just makes sense. Like Bitcoin is just, have a published an article on our blog called Bitcoin is the rational reward. I just think that Bitcoin is, from almost everybody, the most rational thing they can do with their money. And it seems crazy to people who haven't understood it yet, but it really is. It's the safest thing you can do, in my opinion. And yeah, and so then yeah, there's that last section, the laggards of companies that will not think that this is a good idea, that will be resistant to, they'll be the last of the party on this. Nothing you can do about that. I think like I, I think that every company, it may not be BlockRewards in the end, because I'm sure we're going to have lots of competitors eventually. Every company is going to offer this. Like every person is going to want access to Bitcoin through their employer. Like that just makes complete sense to me. Um, and some companies are going to be last, and that's for a lot of those companies. They'll probably be fine with it. But
I have a question. I'm just wondering if I'm allowed to share this, but I've worked for a lot of crypto companies in the past as well. Many of them pay their employees also in Bitcoin, right? And so it's the reward is one part of it, which is like I assume something on top of your salary, right? But
mhm.
you also going to offer the option, for example, like a toggle or something, or some website where like the employer can go and be like, this month, I want 50% of my salary in Bitcoin. Is that part of the master plan here, or am I kind of
Yeah.
getting things
Yeah. I
confused?
mean, we really have a vision to be
Yeah.
able to offer any kind of compensation product that an employer would need uh, in a Bitcoin way. And so there are just tons of ways that people get paid. And to give you a vaguish answer on that, yeah, I think that like part of the opportunity here in realizing that Bitcoin is a transformative financial tool is that, we really need to start thinking about how it could change the way we do things now. And so even I think like when we talk about pay, we think about pay in a very fiat way, and it's like normal for the human mind to think about things in the future largely resembling the way they work now. And so, that could be like, biweekly pay periods or, we'll always be paid in dollars is like the obvious one, right? Well, we'll always be paid in dollars. And, this is like the same thing would have been like with email when in the 90s, we're kind of the same age, right? Like I remember my first year in university getting that was kind of when I got an email address and I had no habit of like checking email. I routinely miss emails from my professors. Like I just didn't, it was not a part of how people thought about stuff. And that was, 5 years later when I was done my undergrad degree, you already couldn't work without an email address. Like it had already become normal. So email is such a good example for me because, there were already other systems that worked, faxes, snail mail, and, that would have been a part of like office culture and how things worked. And the internet at that point in the mid 90s, whatever, was already like 30 years old, 25 years old, right? So when that transition happened, that might have been like year 10 of email. I don't know exactly when the first email was sent, but like, something, let's say, call it year 10 to year 15 of email was the time when it went from being sort of a fringe thing to being like a mandatory aspect of how communication worked. So we're at like year 15 of Bitcoin, right? And if it's anywhere near as virally adopted as email was, then like over the next 5 years, it could become so normal that it would be impossible to imagine how it was before. And like, this is the thing about technology, right? It's like, so why can't it disrupt pay in that way? It already doesn't make sense to trade your time, so much of your time, for money that is already losing value by the time it's been delivered to you, right? In a biweekly pay cycle, you basically front your time and energy to the company for 2 weeks. And at the end of that time, they pay you back. And while they're keeping your money during that time, they're maybe making money on it. And that money is actually melting. So that this is a fundamental problem that Bitcoin solves. And it solves a lot of things, right? Because if companies have to continually look under the couch cushions to pay their employees more in dollar terms because the money is becoming worth less, right? And imagine the idea of all of a sudden paying your employees in money that holds its value or even appreciates. Like this is actually supercharging the biggest line item. Like salaries are totally the biggest expense a company has to manage, right? So, and then beyond that, right? This is another thing about treasuries, which I think is going to be such a fascinating thing to watch unfold. But after a company has really ingested Bitcoin, they've been managing a treasury, their executive team understands why they're doing it, they've seen the results. I think it's inevitable that we're going to start to see companies exhibit low time preference behavior. They're going to excise executives that can't think that way. They'll go work somewhere else. And so because this is what happens to individual people, right? You start saving in Bitcoin and time preference inevitably changes your consumption and spending habits. Like, unless your stack is like so insane. But like, I would say most people who start to really grok Bitcoin change the way they live their lives. So it makes sense to me that companies will start doing the same. Imagine companies start to compete based on low time preference decisions and like, more quality, less race to the bottom stuff. They're going to seem so different. The average fiat company is going to have a hard time understanding like how they're operating. So I think we're in for like Bitcoin is so much more. It's a monetary technology that triggers like a fundamental transformation in the way you think about any sort of financial decision. And so paying people is just another one of these obvious things. Like, it just makes more sense to get your employees involved in doing this. And for so many reasons, like the companies that have been using us already now for a few years, those employees are never quitting ever, because their employer has introduced them to a financial opportunity that changed their lives forever. And you can't manufacture that kind of goodwill. It happens by the result of like doing something that's kind of bold and smart and requires a lot of conviction. And so this is also, man, like one of the most things I'm most excited about in what we're doing is I believe we have a real opportunity to alter the way companies think about the relationship they have with their employees. And it's really exciting. Like this is something where,
I
go
was going to
ahead.
ask you a question. Yeah. So you speak a lot about this idea of how treasuries are becoming a thing. We talked about Trump and BlackRock's, um, and like how like that waterfall effect will eventually make it inevitable that block rewards or Bitcoin rewards are ubiquitous. What about the other way around? Like when I think of any company I've worked for in the past, there's like five executives, but then there's like 500 employees. And the odds of an employee being orange pilled before an executive, I'd argue are probably like orders of magnitude higher, right? So is there also kind of like a way that orange pilled employees can poke their employer and be like, "Hey, buddy, let's get with the times here, or else I'm gonna leave."
I hope so. Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of desire to like connect to Bitcoiners and have that be a part of how we get introduced to their companies. And another way that we can help that along is that we don't require a participation percentage. So if a company wanted to start with us, we don't need everybody. We can start by working with a handful of employees that you already know want this. So yeah, it's like in places where the money has already really failed, Argentina, wherever, if people had the opportunity today to work for dollars or work for pesos, they would absolutely prefer to work for dollars, right? Because they're probably going to be trying to trade their pesos for dollars anyways. And I think that's will happen, it's a crazy idea for people. Because we sort of, I think, have just a lot more faith and trust in our institutions and in our money. We believe it is better somehow than all the other fiat monies, even though it's not. Like all fiat monies are the same, hyperinflating at different speeds. But when we get to a place where people start to understand that and they just kind of demand it, I definitely think it. To answer your question, yeah, man, I think it's bottom up and top down.
And how does this business scale? So, if I'm not mistaken, you guys are based in Kelowna in Canada. You service a Canadian market, I assume the United States at one point. But because Bitcoin is kind of the backbone of this business, does it make your job a bit easier in terms of as you think globally, or are you guys more just focused on kind of what's in Canada and North America?
Yeah, I mean, I envision a world where everybody has access to, and the expectation if that they want to be able to earn Bitcoin at work. And some company is going to do this in a way that's global. And we would love it to be us. So yeah, our next market is the US and we're working on that now. And from there, we have every intention to get into Europe, India, you name it. Like this is something that I think, because also like Bitcoin is it's universal money, right? It already is a stupid idea that we have like 170 different forms of money. And money is the least innovative technology because governments have a monopoly on determining what money is. But Bitcoin was engineered to outcompete government money because it's the only form of money in the world that doesn't steal from you. So the notion that we could have a uniform concept of what money is could really change the way we think about work, and like how do we then value an hour's labor in Uganda versus an hour's labor in Germany? And companies that have employees in, like multinational companies starting to think about Bitcoin, both in terms of like the problem that Bitcoin would solve in moving money internationally. Obviously, like there's a big opportunity with, solving like remittances. And I think is like, it just makes more sense that we use this form of money that settles finally and can be sent anywhere in minutes. And, and the idea that we would all be using the same money, also solves a massive problem, right? Because in lots of places in the world, like I said, where the money is already vastly more broken, the money problem is way bigger, right? Like people don't have any opportunity to even think about accumulating wealth because, it's places again like Argentina where they're like sometimes updating the prices of food in grocery stores like multiple times in a day. Um, so this is like a something that could really change the way people are able to show up for their employer and transform their like local communities by having now access to the ability to preserve wealth in a meaningful way and store the fruits of their labors. Like Bitcoin is a Swiss bank account in your pocket. And inside that Swiss bank account is money that can't be debased. It's a crazy innovation. Everybody needs this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I've always kind of come at it from like, I run an exchange, so it's always about, hey, well, I've got rupees or dollars and I want to turn it into Bitcoin. But getting to it at the source, which is like where people get their money, is genius. I absolutely love the idea. Um, so I heard you're speaking at the Canadian Bitcoin conference, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, what are you going to speak about? And are you excited?
I am super excited. Daniel Licht, this year they've organized a corporate seminar, which is happening the day before the actual conference starts. There's a full day event for companies to learn about all the different aspects of how Bitcoin could be meaningful for them. On that day, I'm giving a 1 hour presentation about Bitcoin savings plan and paying your employees in Bitcoin. So if
Wow,
you're listening and
that's
you're in the
exciting.
area, you can make it. You're anywhere near the Montreal area, and you're an executive leader. Like this is going to be a really high value day. And I think I'm on stage a couple more times throughout the course of the weekend. So yeah, really looking forward to that event. Last year was amazing. The Rialto Theater in Montreal is an awesome venue, and Montreal's a fun city to visit. Tons of uh, high quality speakers. Like they've done an amazing job recruiting lots of great people. It's gonna be a high signal event, and I love conferences. I think if you've never been to a Bitcoin event, you're totally missing out because it's just a different energy there.
Totally. And you said you went to the Bitcoin conference in Vegas as well, right?
Yeah, I was in
What'd you think
Vegas.
of that?
Vegas is wild. There's like there's so many. There was like 40,000 people there this year, and huge stages and yeah, lots going on. I've been to events. Like I was at Bitcoin Alive in Sydney, Australia last March. I was at a Bitcoin conference in El Salvador a few months before that. So they're happening everywhere, and I think it's cool. Bitcoin is a global thing. Um, I think it's the most viral idea ever, right? It's like a bit this really cool thing about Bitcoin, that's inspired me and so many other people is something about the data pack, like the aha moment when you really understand it. For a lot of people, like causes a compulsion to want other people to understand it. Like that's just something that happens, right? And so you go to conferences and it's a lot of that, right? So it's a lot of people obviously who are there because they already get it. But um, yeah, I mean, Bitcoin to me is like it's the most exciting idea because innovating and solving this money problem is like if we can do one thing to really make everybody's life better, it's this thing, right? Like this is it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I always say before I discovered Bitcoin, I quite honestly didn't even want to have kids. I was just like, this world seems like a really dark place. This whole inflation thing and money printing and everything else that kind of falls downstream from there just seems horrible. And then you go from like complaining and whining and protesting to all of a sudden like believing in something that can actually materially change the world. And it's only like what one half of every transaction.
Yeah.
It kind of matters. Yeah, so I think I do think I love the community angle. In fact, I'm a big meetup and conference guy myself, and I have a bit of a formula where once we pass an all-time high, I start doing weekly meetups. So last week I started doing weekly meetups, and I'm doing it again this Saturday. I just picked a bar downtown, and our first one we had like 12 or 13 people over. Yes, half of them were my family and my kids and my wife and her friends, and but uh but it made for a good picture. And next week maybe we'll have 20, 24, or 25. We'll see. And I find like using the Bitcoin price is kind of like, a wind in your sail type of thing. Works really nice. You don't have to do any marketing. Just show up every week and they just keep getting bigger and bigger. And before you know it, there's like 1,000 people, at the Sheraton or something like that. So I've done that, a bunch of times in the past, and I feel like that moment's here again. It's like everyone wants to get together, and now it's like compounded because the whole COVID thing almost, even people who were social and like to connect, I feel like something happened during those years where people kind of just fell out of the groove, but they're all itching to be with like-minded, Bitcoiners.
Hmm.
But I don't know what you about. I don't really see a lot of events, things like that happening yet. And so I was gonna try and, take the charge on that. But how's the community in Kelowna? Yeah, are there
Yeah,
many
we
Bitcoiners?
actually
Are there any?
we had a meetup last night.
Oh, nice.
Kelowna meetup is going pretty strong. And Kelowna's only like 170,000, 200,000 people, depending on how big you draw the area. And we got our meetup group, Telegram group, has I think around 90 or 100 people, and the average meet in person would have between 20 and 30. So we're punching up pretty good, I think, for a community the
Amazing.
size of this. And
I gotta come out to the Kelowna one of these days.
yeah,
That'd be fun. Kelowna is actually one of my favorite places, as we used to visit a lot as a kid. I just remember oranges. You could have a lot of oranges.
tons of fruit here. Yeah,
Tons of fruit, right? Yeah.
yeah.
So Scott,
Yeah,
you said
there's a Twitter handle for that
yes.
group, which is
Oh,
Kelowna BTC Meet. Yeah,
okay. Okay. And what about
yeah.
your guys' at BlockRewards? What's your Twitter handle?
It's block_rewards.
And what about, I was going to actually say this, this has been, by the way, a really fun conversation. I'm down to do it again soon.
Cool.
But maybe help me land the plane here a little bit. You share also where your Twitter handle is, if you have one personally, the website, but then also kind of what do you want to leave people with? Like, yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation. You're really well read. You seem like you're a deep thinker, and and it's always exciting. Like I've been doing this obsession over Bitcoin thing since like 2012 or whatever, and one of my favorite parts is connecting with people, and so I just love, your vibe, your energy. I love what you're doing with the company. It's very, very exciting. But yeah, maybe like I said, help me land the plane here.
Yeah, thanks, Sonny. And thanks again for having me on, man. I've enjoyed it as well. My Twitter handle is Lantern Bitcoin. And I'm on there probably more than I should be. And the website is blockrewards.ca. Depending on when this airs, we might already be blockrewards.com. We're in the transition process right now as we gear up for this pending US launch. So that's really exciting. Where I would leave people, I would say, is if you've been listening to this, even if you're in the US, if you're an employee or an employer, like we'd love to talk to you. And I think like yeah, sometimes people wonder about is their company big enough or would my company really offer this? And we would rather be involved in that conversation. So I don't think there's a company that's too small to consider doing this. And it's our job to help companies understand why they would want to think about rolling this out and help them with how. So yeah, there's an intake form on the homepage at Block Rewards and to get some information and get the conversation going. And we'd love to hear from you. Like truly, we're the best thing we can do is get companies starting to think about what this is and how it works. And it might take a company, a year or 2 years to make a decision like this. So it doesn't even have to be right now.
And Scott, did you say you have a podcast?
Yeah, the Block Reward podcast. We just hit 100 episodes. So been
Wow.
at it for a couple of years, and the Block Reward is kind of I host it. It comes from my background, so like I had the approach with educating people in traditional financial products, like really trying to do layman's term stuff, and that was how I was brought up through selling like group savings plans, and so I kind of take that approach with the Block Reward. It's like it's not the Bitcoin podcast for the hardcore Bitcoiner, but it is a conversational show. We have new episodes every Tuesday with a different guest, and so they're conversations that are niche to that guest's particular area of interest. So it could be mining, geopolitics, economics, you name it, but tried to have the conversation in a way that somebody who's not super deep down the Bitcoin rabbit hole could watch it and follow it. And it's on all the platforms, YouTube, Spotify, all of the audio only platforms.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I love everything you're doing. I'm looking forward to hopefully meeting you in a couple weeks in Montreal as well. And
Yeah,
thank you for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. Fantastic story, great company, and truly inspirational. I love stuff like this, man. So thank you, Scott.
thank you.
All right, we'll talk soon. Cheers.